Hey, and welcome everyone to our basics session for Caspio Flex. Today's session is all about the basics. In today's class, we will see a live demo of the application we plan on developing. We will learn how to create directories for our application users, how to create all the tables and how to import data from Excel, create roles and assign permissions, how to manage app segments and app pages, and finally, how to create a form data part followed up with deployment. So again, it's all about the basics, learning how to set up the foundation for what's to come in the intermediate and the advanced sessions. I do recommend that you watch all 3 sessions because we piggyback on what we do in the prior class in order to complete the entire application. Now let's go inside Caspio. First thing I want to mention is that you'll notice here at the top that Caspio's platform has 2 different development frameworks. Bridge is Caspio's original framework, widely used since 2001. It's designed for users who need maximum control and customization, which makes it ideal for tech-savvy users who aren't afraid to use some code for maximum flexibility. Flex, on the other hand, is Caspio's newer framework, and it's designed for ease of use. It's perfect for users who may not have coding experience, but still want to build powerful applications quickly. It's fully hosted by Caspio, so you don't need to have a website, but we still give you the option to embed, even using Flex as well. We do offer live training sessions for both Bridge and Flex, but just keep in mind that you are currently signed up to learn how to use the Flex framework. So with that said, let's take a look at the live demo of the application. And the app that we're going to build is a contact management system. The whole premise of this application is to have a public-facing lead form that anybody who visits our website will be able to fill out, and upon submission, we can log in either as the admin or a sales rep, and based on our permissions, we're going to be able to do and see different things within the portal. So I will go ahead and log in as Sarah Lee, who happens to be the admin of this application. It's fictitious data. And upon logging in, we're going to be able to see a dashboard view that shows us some KPIs, contacts by month, by status, logs by user, and a few other details. As the admin, we can also go into manage contacts, and here we can filter our leads or contacts using some fields and some drop downs. We can also drill in by going into details, and here we can modify the information pertaining to that contact. We can also leave logs, and last but not least, as the admin, we can create a contact internally as well. So now let's go ahead and log out and log in as a sales rep so we can see the difference in functionality. My sample user happens to be John Doe. And as John Doe, we have the ability to filter data as well. We can see all the contacts in the database, all the contacts that have been assigned to myself, also Sarah Lee or any other sales rep inside the application. The difference here is we have record level security set up. So if I go into the details for this contact that's been assigned to Sarah Lee, you'll notice that I don't have the ability to modify the information, but I can still leave logs if I wanted to. And then if I go back and access the details of a contact that my name has been assigned to, then I have the ability to update the information. So we have some record level security here that based on which contact you're going into details for, you may or may not have the ability to edit if you're linked or assigned to that specific contact. And last but not least, as the sales rep, we can also create a contact, same as the admin can. So it's a very basic application. It's meant to be an entry-level application to get you familiar with how to use the Flex framework. And this is the application we're going to develop. So let's go inside Caspio and learn how to do so. Once inside Caspio, you want to make sure you have the right framework selected. If you're building your applications using the Bridge framework, make sure you have that tab selected. But in this video guide, we're going to be building our application using the Flex framework. There are 2 ways here on how you can begin. You can start developing your application and begin building some components for your application, such as tables, maybe some data parts, or you can import an application from Caspio's marketplace and modify that application if it closely matches your exact use case and what you're hoping to develop. And you can also begin directly inside Directories, which is my personal preference. Any application that you build using Flex You will at some point have to go inside directories to add all of your employees and users inside it. So that's why I always like to make that my starting point. And I will create my directory. Let's call it employees. And within that directory, at some point, we're going to add all of our sales reps, all of our admins, managers, supervisors, depending on how many groups you might have, and also how many employees you have. They're all going to be stored within that directory. You can also convert an existing table into a directory. So let's say you imported an Excel file that contains all of your employee data. You can easily convert that into a directory as well. I'm going to create my directory from scratch. And as you can see, it's an empty directory. There are no employees listed just yet. Up here at the top, you're going to be able to see a few tabs. Inside our knowledge base, we have a lot of articles and videos that explain each tab, but just to quickly summarize, the Groups tab allows you to organize your users and employees into different groups. It also helps move users into their respective role, and I will talk a little bit about that later on in the video. Security tab allows you to enable two-factor authentication on the login screen, along with additional password security policies. User Portal allows you to manage the look and feel of the login screen. So if you want to change the logo on the login screen and a color palette, you can do that. Emails are automatic emails that go out, maybe based on a submission or some other way, and you can modify and customize the messaging inside the email. Identity providers allow you to add your own external IDP. So if your organization has Okta or Microsoft Active Directory, you can connect those IDPs to your Caspio account, and the users within those IDPs can now log into your Caspio applications. And finally, we have app connections. So any user listed inside your Caspio directory, if you choose to do so, and you connect to, let's say, Slack or Salesforce, these employees or these users will be able to log into those external applications. Now, I will create 2 sample users for our video today. I will start by adding an email, and let's go with sarahlee@acme.com. We have 2 additional optional fields, so I will just list the first and last name. For the sign-in method, we're going to use the Caspio IDP, which is built into the platform. But as I mentioned before, if you connect your external IDP using this tab, you will be able to see that listed inside the dropdown. We will activate the user, and at this point, I'm not going to send an email because this is a fictitious email. But later on, once you're done building your application and you start adding your actual employees, then it might be beneficial for you to activate their account using an email. And then you can click on the link to activate the account. But because we're not going to do that, we're going to just generate the password. I don't want the user to change the password on the first login. There's no need for that. It's just a sample user. I'm just going to rename this password to test123 ! Something easy to remember. And then we have something called groups and application access. You can organize each user that you add into a specific group, which later on when it comes to creating roles, which we'll talk about in the video today, it makes it easier to move the entire group of users into a role as opposed to one user at a time. But again, I will clarify that as we get later on in the video. I'm not going to add a group in my video. And then application access, what Flex allows you to do is to have multiple applications within the platform, and then you can choose which user is going to have access to what application. Let's hit create, and we should be able to see Sarah listed as our very first user inside the directory. Let's add John Doe as well. That's going to be my second user. Just call this John Doe. Activate the user, generate password. I'll change that to something easy to remember. And then uncheck this box and click on create. And just like that, we have 2 users added to our directory. If your organization has 1,000 employees or 10,000 employees, you can list them all inside the directory. Caspio is never going to charge you any fees per user. Now, one thing I always like to do here at the very beginning is I always like to have one more field here added called full name. I like to concatenate my first and last name together because in an application environment, it's beneficial to have both the first and last name in its own column and also full name in its own column. The reason being is, let's say you're sending an email or an SMS text, it makes sense just to use the first name. You will say, "Hi, John," and then you compose your message. But maybe in reporting, to save on space on the reports, instead of having two columns, it's much cleaner to have a full name displayed as opposed to two columns. But again, to each their own. I will just show you how to add a full name by going to Manage Fields. That takes me inside the table design. I will add a full name field. I'll move that underneath my last name. And then for the data type, we have something called formula. You're going to click on the edit link here to the right. Place the first name and last name side by side. And a little bit of syntax is needed in between the first and last name. You can't just add a space. That's going to give you an invalid formula. So to create the space, we have to add a plus sign, space, and then in parentheses, add a 1 and another plus sign. And it's very easy to type that out. Now, when you verify the formula, you will see that it's a valid formula. We'll click Apply, save our table, and then return back to Directory View. And now, if you wish to see the full name, click on the columns. Just drag the full name maybe underneath the last name, click on columns again, and you should be able to see that listed in the directory. In fact, you can add any field to your directory by going to Manage Fields, such as phone number, maybe address for each one of your employees, whichever information you want to track for each one of your users listed inside the directory. And this is really all I wanted to do inside the directory. Of course, if you wish, you can add more sample data, but just remember, once you're done building your application and you're ready to go live in production, you may want to remove your sample users and add your actual employees inside the directory. Now we're going to return back to Applications, go back to the Flex tab, and start developing our application. I will do so from scratch. Once you click on this button, it's going to take you inside the framework for Flex. And by default, the very first thing that you're going to go to is the Overview tab. The Overview tab here is mostly informational. It also serves as a guide in helping you progress as you develop your application. And at some point, you're going to be able to see this screen expand based on the components that you developed. And it's really going to help you understand, what users you have in your application, what app pages, what data parts in terms of metrics and understanding the structure of your application. And I will make it a point to come back to the overview screen later in the video so that you can see exactly what we have developed and what this screen looks like based on the progress that you make. Now, in the beginning, one thing that I always like to do is just give my application a name. Let's call this Contact Management System. Of course, you will have your own naming convention. I will hit Save. And there is my application name. If we go back out to Applications and we click on the Flex tab, you will now see this tile for that specific application. We can reopen it. We see the name, and now we can develop some components for the application. And I will begin inside the Tables tab. The tables are the foundation of any app that you develop in Flex or the Bridge framework. That's always going to be the starting point because that's where all of our data is going to reside. And I will need to create 3 tables for this application. We're going to need a contacts table, we're going to need a logs table, and just a simple lookup table for all the statuses. Now, you can build your table from scratch. If you have data in Excel, you can import data. That also creates a table inside Caspio. But if you want to use AI to build your table and get some suggestions, you can click on this icon up here for AI Assistant. If you just type out a prompt or some way of what you're looking to build, for example, create a contacts table. The AI assistant is going to suggest what table we might want to have inside it. And then you can just simply say, create this table, and then make any edits you need to any of the fields that are presented to us. If you don't wish to use the AI assistant, you can always toggle that on and off, or you can go to the account settings and completely turn off AI inside your account if you don't wish to use any type of AI assistance. For me, in today's video, I'm going to show you how to create some tables from scratch and also how to import data from Excel. So let me show you my Excel file. My Excel file contains all of my contact information. And you can see we have rows and columns. The very first row, if you're importing data into Caspio, has to contain all of your field names. Otherwise, Caspio is going to convert this name into a field name. So make sure your very first row contains the field names, and then underneath that, you have all of your data. Also, if your Excel file contains formulas, you're not going to be able to import the formulas into Caspio. Those will have to be built in Caspio. So the only thing that Caspio looks for is a clean data set, just the raw data that we wish to import. So let's see how we can do that. We're going to import data, locate the file on our computer. Okay, I have it inside this folder. Here's my contacts Excel file. We're going to hit next. Okay, it's preparing the files, and in just a second here, we're going to be able to bring that Excel file into Caspio by first going inside the import wizard. Okay, so we need to make a few modifications. The first thing we want to do is choose what application we want to import that into. You're going to be able to see our bridge applications, and then we have our brand new contact management system for Flex. I only have one table that I'm importing from Excel. If your Excel file contains multiple data sheets and you save that as a workbook file and import it into Caspio, you will be able to see 3 different tables, and then you can pick and choose which one you want to import. I only have one, so we're going to make sure that's selected. And then we have the action column. This is the most important column when it comes to importing data into Caspio. Depending on your selection here, it gives us a different end result or behavior as we import data into Caspio. In my video today, we're going to create a brand new table inside our contact management system. But let's say, for example, you already had this data imported, and today you have a brand new data set. You can replace that table that's already inside your account with the new data set that you're importing. You can also append new data into your Caspio table if you already had that table inside your account. And we have update. Update deals with just specific changes that you made in your Excel file. So if you, let's say, for example, in your Excel file, you made some changes to your contacts, maybe the name, maybe the phone number, and you only want to apply the changes that you made, you will choose the update action. Now, keep in mind that if you do that on the following screen, it's going to ask you to map both the external, the Excel file, and the source file in your Caspio account. And as long as the ID matches, then Caspio knows how to find that change and update the change. Okay, so both your Excel file will need to have some kind of a unique ID, and the table inside your account will need to have a matching ID, and that's how Caspio knows which file it needs to update. And finally, we have update table design, which deals with new fields. So if, let's say, in your Excel file, you decided to add a new field, maybe fax number, maybe gender, and you have some data. If you choose update table design and you select your table, now the reason why you don't see any tables here is because I don't have any tables inside the Flex framework or that specific application. It's empty. But if I did, then I would just be able to attach those newly added fields to any one of my existing tables that I select in this dropdown. Today, we're going to create a new table. We're going to call this maybe CM, which stands for Contact Management System, demo_contacts. I always like to add a prefix to my table names. So later on, if I'm exporting my application or my tables, it's much easier to locate those specific tables because they pertain to CMS, which I know stands for Contact Management System. Now, what you want to do now is click on Next, and this is the final screen before we import the file into our application. Here you see the original field names in your Excel file. You can rename those fields to something else. You can also choose to import all the columns. It's always checked by default, but you can also uncheck that if you want to. And then we have something called data type. Data type just depends on what type of data you wish to store in that specific column or field. For example, text 255 supports up to 255 characters inside the actual field, which is good for short answers like first name, last name, phone, email, etc. Text 64,000 is great if you have a comments field, message, notes, which supports up to 64,000 text or long text. Integer, number, and currency is great if you're building let's say a sales application, and you want to manage pipeline, forecast, revenue, always good to use a number data type or integer or currency, because later on you can do calculations and be able to do formulas. Attachment pertains to the Flex framework. Okay, so if you're looking to add a PDF document or some other file, you're going to choose attachment. Auto number GUID, we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Date and time is always good to have in a table if you wish to make an update or know when something was added to a table. Yes and no is a checkbox, it's a Boolean. Really good if you want to use it for approval process. Let's say you're looking at an invoice and you want to approve that invoice using a checkbox method. File doesn't pertain to the Flex framework. File only works inside the Bridge framework. So that's an important distinction to make here. If you wish to have attachments, use the attachment data type with Flex. Use the file data type if you're using Bridge. Password also doesn't pertain inside the Flex framework because we use the password inside the directory to manage all the users. But Bridge has a unique way of creating user logins where you can use the password data type as well. And then timestamp can be used inside Flex as well. It just automatically stamps the date and time of each submission. Okay, I'm not going to make any changes here. We're going to click on import. It shouldn't take too long to bring the data into our Caspio account. Okay, so from here you can go directly inside your table to see the data. You can go inside the app overview, or if you close the screen, once again, you're going to go inside the app overview. So let's close the screen. And now that we brought some data into our account, you can see how the overview screen changes. Right? We have now public access, which we'll talk about in just a minute. We have visibility in how many app pages we have, data parts, and whether or not we can deploy some app pages to the web. And again, I'll talk more about this later in the video, but for now, let's go inside the tables and review the data that we imported. So here's my table. I'm going to open it, and just like in Excel, we should be able to see all of our data along with clicking inside each cell to make modifications. Now, one thing I'm going to do here is go inside a table design and make a few modifications. The first thing that I want to add that my Excel file didn't have is some kind of a unique ID. And we're going to call this contact ID and move this to the very top. Best practice is that every table that you create must have some kind of a unique ID that's going to be used to uniquely identify each row in your table. In a database environment, that's called a primary key. Now, Caspio gives us 4 different ID types that we can choose from. I always recommend either random ID or a GUID, which are longer IDs and much more secure. I'm going to stick with GUID or GUID for my primary key for this table. If I save my table now and go back into the datasheet tab, you will now see how every single contact has this unique ID. And this ID will never repeat. It's going to be unique to that specific contact. Another field that I want to add to this table is company description. And we're going to set this to text 64,000 because description fields, as I mentioned before, typically have long text. I'm going to move this underneath my company name. And the reason why I add this field to my table is in the Advanced tab, I'm going to show you how we use AI extensions to send the company name to OpenAI to generate a result back inside our Caspio table. And we're going to fetch the company description using GPT Connect. And we're going to feed that data directly into that field, which is pretty awesome. Not only can you generate company description, but you can also do things like, company size in terms of employees, and it'll just feed you a number into that field or any other information that you want. There are many ways to use GPT Connect with Caspio, even to analyze an image. So if you're building an expense tracking application, you can upload a receipt, and then GPT Connect can extract the information from that receipt and feed that into your Caspio table, which is pretty cool. And that's really all the changes I want to make to my table. We're going to hit save. But there is one more field that I need to add, which I almost forgot, and that's going to be the user ID. I'll move this underneath my company ID field. The user ID now becomes a foreign key inside the contacts table. And what we're going to do with that field is when we actually, since we have our directory, Inside our directory, each employee, Sarah and John, have their own unique ID. We're going to link these contacts to our employees because we want to associate the contact to each employee so that we know which contact is assigned to what employee. So in our intermediate session, you will see how we stamp the employee ID into the contacts table so that we know which contact is linked to what employee. So now I'm going to save my table and go back out to the tables menu. And let's go ahead and create our second table, which will be used to store all of the logs. So the first field we want to add is the log ID. Again, we're going to choose the GUID number, GUID. I also want the user ID so that I know which employee submitted the log. We always want to be able to track this information. We also want contact ID as well so that we know for which contact we left that log for. Very important to have both of these two foreign keys inside this table. And then you can have all of your log information inside this table. So for example, log type, which can be a phone log, it can be an email log or some other type of log. Date submitted, when the log was submitted. And for that, we're going to just simply use a timestamp. Then we want notes, which is going to be the comments that we left. So if we received an email, we want to be able to copy and paste that email into this notes section. That's going to be text 64,000. And that's really all I want to add for this table. We're going to save it and let's call this CMS TBL logs. All right, so now let's go ahead and add our third table, which will be a very simple status lookup table. And we're going to call this status ID. For status ID, maybe we can use a simple auto number and then we have the status itself. We're going to save this table, CMS TBL status lookup. Let's open up the status lookup table and quickly add a few status options that we might see in the dropdown. So a contact can be new. If it comes in via that public facing form, we want to automatically flag that lead as new. Maybe we have in progress. Maybe we have archived. And maybe we have something like canceled. Of course, you will have your own status options. This is just me listing a few that we could use for each one of our contacts. And let's go back out to the tables menu and we have completed all of the tables that our application is going to have. The next step is to go down to roles and set up the roles that our application will have. So let's create some roles. The first role that we're going to create is the admin role. We have our directory created already, which is, we called it employees. We're going to hit create. And what you can do here for the admin role is you can set up default permissions. So whether the admin can create data, read, update, or delete, these are your standard CRUD settings. Now for me as the admin, I always feel that the admin role should have the ability to do everything. So I'm just going to set this to all records. And if you want the admins to have the ability to delete via the web, you can set this to all records as well. In just a moment, I will show you how you can add custom permissions. But for now, I will save my settings. I will go into the user tab, add my user, and now decide which one of these users is going to be the admin of my application. I'll choose Sarah and click add. Now remember when I talked about groups earlier? If you had a group inside the directory and you added all the users initially into that group, it's much easier now to add a whole group as a list of users inside the admin role as opposed to adding one user at a time. So that's the benefit of using groups inside Flex. Okay, let's go back out to the roles tab. We have our admin role created. There's one user inside that role. Let's set up our second one for sales reps. Same directory, click on create. Now you can choose to have these default permissions or you can have custom permissions. I'm going to create custom permissions. So here we have our tables listed, so we can add custom permissions for each table. I will have custom permissions on the contacts table. And here's what we're going to do. Every single employee or sales rep in this case should have the ability to add contacts. So we're going to say all records. Now, when it comes to reading data, they should all be able to view and read the data for each contact. So that makes sense. Now for updating, I don't want John to be able to update a contact if that contact is assigned to Sarah Lee. So what we can do under update is set this to user's own records, choose the foreign key in this table, which is the user ID, click on apply, and now each user or each sales rep will only be able to update the information for a contact that they have been assigned to. As for delete, you can do the same thing, but I don't know if it's necessary to have the sales reps be able to delete any information. So we're going to leave that as none. And now let's add additional custom permissions on the logs table. And for the logs table, we should be able to create all logs. So I want all the employees or all the sales reps, admins to be able to create logs. They should be able to read every single log. But when it comes to updating logs, I only want them to be able to update the logs that they have posted. And I don't want them to be able to delete any because typically it's best practice to archive data in an application. So when you're done, you can go ahead and click on Save. And we have finished creating all the roles for our application, and we have also finished setting up all the permissions for both the sales reps and the admin. Again, the admin has the ability to do everything, but sales reps, as you can see, we have created some custom permissions based on the tables that we have in our application. The next step is to move over to the Designer tab. Now we can begin building all the front-end components for our application, including the navigation menu. We can also customize the look and feel of the header. We can customize the look and feel of the forms that will eventually be inside this app page. But before I begin, I do want to talk a little bit about the overview of the Designer tab. When you create a role inside your Flex framework, each time you create a role, automatically you will see a corresponding app segment that pertains to that specific role that we just created. So because I created both the admin and sales reps inside the Designer tab, you will see both of those. But here it's no longer called a role. Now it has a different unique name. It's called an app segment. And each segment is unique in its own way because you can customize the look and feel of that segment to look completely different than any other segment inside your application. And what do I mean by that? To best explain what I mean by that is to simply start adding some app pages to each segment, and then I will explain as I'm building these app pages what happens to the navigation menu and how you can modify the navigation menu as well. So for example, for the admin segment, if I click on Add App Page, we can choose that app segment called Admin. And we know that the admin is going to have the ability to manage contacts, so we can quickly create that app page name, and we're going to be able to see that listed. Now in my live demo, if you recall, when an admin logs in, they have the visibility into the dashboard view. So I'm going to add another app page, and we're going to call this dashboard and add that into the admin segment. But notice now when I'm adding these app pages into my admin segment, the navigation menu is automatically created for that specific app segment. We have Manage Contacts and we have Dashboard. If you want to be able to modify this segment here at the very top, you can either click here to edit the header, or you can click on the app segment itself, and that allows you to click inside this window now where you can modify the navigation menu. So if you click on the navigation menu, over here on the right, you can now move the dashboard page above Manage Contacts, and it rearranges the navigation menu for you. If you want the dashboard page to be the home page when the user logs in, you can click on the three dots and you can set that as the home page. You can see how the home icon moved to the dashboard page. Now, once again, when you click on the admin segment, you're going to be able to see these sections visibility here. And you have the ability to hide and show these sections based on how you wish to modify the admin segment. So for example, if you don't wish to see this footer section, you can just hide that and it's no longer visible. If you wish to move the navigation menu into the left panel, you can expand the left panel like this. You can see how it expanded. Now when you click inside the admin segment, which we're already in, if you click on add elements, you're going to see these widgets that we can add into our segment. So for example, I can add this menu and drag this into my left panel, and it automatically creates the same exact navigation menu. So if you prefer having the navigation menu on the left-hand side as opposed to top, you can move it here, you can rearrange the navigation menu again, and then you can simply just delete or remove the navigation menu from the top. Now when we log in as the user, our navigation menu will be on the left. Now, what did I mean by each app segment being unique in its own way? If we go to the sales rep, you will now see that for this segment, the navigation menu is still going to appear on the top because we don't have the left panel enabled and we're still showing the header section. So let me give you an example. If I add an app page for the sales rep segment and we say create a contact, you can see how the navigation menu is on the top. Let me add one more app page, manage contacts. You can see how the navigation again menu is created automatically, but for the admin, the navigation menu is on the left, but for the sales rep, the navigation menu is on the top. So you can change the experience for each user when they log into the application based on how you modify these app segments. For my sales reps, I do want to have the manage contacts be the home page. So I will click on the three dots and set that to be the home page. Now I will need to have a few more app pages created, so just bear with me. The admin user does need to have the ability to create a contact as well, if you recall from my live example. So I will just select the admin segment and call this create a contact. Okay, if we go back here, you can see how we added a new navigation menu item, create a contact. Now I will reverse this. I will revert back and go back to the top navigation menu because that is my preference, but it's completely up to you where you wish to have that navigation menu. You can also have it inside the right panel if you'd like, left panel or on the top, or you can even have it in the footer section. So what I'm going to do is simply add my menu. Okay, we can move this to the right. And then I don't want the navigation menu to be on the left, so I will just remove that and simply just hide this panel so that I can expand my page and be able to see all of my forms and reports later on here inside this window. So again, I do want to rearrange my navigation menu. I will click on it and just move the dashboard to the very top, and it shows up right over here. So now we have dashboard, manage contacts, and create a contact as part of my navigation menu. If I want to change the logo, again, you have to be inside the admin segment in order to do that. So make sure you always click on this first, and now you can click on the company logo, and let's replace it. I have an image that I'm going to select. This fictitious logo that I have, Tech Lab Solutions. We'll add that in there, and it replaces the default logo that we had before. Now I will have to repeat that for my sales rep segment as well. So I will go down there, click on it, and select the same logo, and it'll be replaced. So let's add two more app pages, one for the sales rep and one for the admin. So for the admin, we're going to add something called contact details and click add. Inside the admin segment, you can see that we added contact details, but that doesn't need to be part of our navigation menu. That's just going to have the contacts details, the logs, and the form to add a log. There's no reason for that to be part of our navigation menu. So if you click on the navigation menu, we have a little eye icon here that you can click on, and you can see how it hides it from the navigation menu. But you can still get to it by clicking a different element inside one of your forms and reports. But again, it doesn't need to be part of the navigation menu. We're going to do the same thing for sales reps. I do want to show you a trick here. You don't have to keep adding. You can just click on the three dots and duplicate and add that into the sales rep segment. You can have the same name, click on duplicate, and now we created the same exact app page in both the sales rep segment and also the admin segment. So these are going to be all the app pages that we're going to have for each one of our segments, the admin role and also the sales rep role. Now, our application is going to have a public segment as well, because if you remember from my live demo, we had a public-facing form that anybody can fill out so that we can generate leads, and then the admin can assign those leads to one of our sales reps. By default, you will see this app page already created. You can just rename that maybe to something else, maybe call it Contact Us. If your application doesn't have a public segment, you can just ignore this. You can collapse it and you never have to worry about this segment whatsoever if you're just building completely an internal application. But that's not the case in our example. We want a public-facing form. And now I'm going to show you how to create that form so that anybody can fill that out and then we can generate those leads. So one important thing to mention here is if you click on the public segment and you click on Add Elements, you're going to be able to see widgets if you access the segment itself. However, if you click on the app page and you click on Add Elements, now you're going to be able to see data parts, which you can drag and drop into the canvas or your app page. Before I do so, I just want to remember to add my logo. So I will click on the public segment, click on the logo, and just replace that with the Tech Lab Solutions like that. Now I will click on the app page itself, click on Add Elements, and I will choose the submission form. You don't have to drag. You can drag and drop into the app page itself, or you can just click on it. It's up to you. So just to show you can drag and drop, add that into your app page, and now you can select the table where you want that data to go when the user submits the form. So I will select the contacts table, decide what fields we want to have in our form. So we want first name, last name, title. Likely we're going to have a lot of these fields: phone, email, address, city, state, zip, status, and date created. User ID you don't need to have because the admin level is going to see a drop down and they're going to manually choose what user that lead is going to be assigned to. We're going to hit next, and now you can modify the fields. Okay, how you want the data or how you want these fields to be presented as part of your overall design. So for example, first name, you could choose to have that be a text field. We can make that field required. Under layout, you have some options here as well. I love the float effect, which means you're going to see a placeholder text inside your field. But when you click inside the field, that label is going to automatically position itself here right above. So that's my preference. I'd like to have the last name be next to my first name in the same row. So I will choose inline, which is automatically going to place the last name next to my first name. Let's go to the last name now. Choose float. Make that field a required field as well. Let's go to the title field. I will again choose float, inline. I will put the company name field right next to it. So we will choose float. Company name is going to be a required field because I do want to generate a company description for that company name. If you remember what I mentioned before, we're going to use GPT Connect in the advanced session of this video guide to show you how we can generate that company description. So that's why I want to make that a required field so that we can generate something inside this field. Now, this doesn't need to be on the form. I moved it by accident. Just remove it because we're automatically going to populate the description inside the database. The phone number field, again, I can make that field required. Choose float, inline, and then the email field is going to be next to it. Float, again, you can make that field required as well if you choose to do so. Then we have our address field for this one. Again, so we're going to keep everything uniform, consistent. We're going to use float. Address is usually by itself. Then we're going to go back down here and choose whether or not we want that field to be required. Then we have city. And for city, again, just continue, float, inline. You can choose to have that be required. State is going to be next to it. So we're going to use float. You can choose to have the zip code be next to the state if you want to. I'm not going to do that. Let's just have that be in its own field. Then finally, we have status, choose float. And then we have, for status, we're going to choose drop down as opposed to the text field. Actually, for this field, we're going to choose hidden, my mistake, because by default, we want to flag that as a new lead. There's no need for a drop down there. It's a public facing form. Each time that form is submitted, we want to flag that automatically as new. Date created is going to be a timestamp. And one thing that I forgot to do to my table is to actually turn this field into a timestamp. So let's actually save this form. I want to show you how, even if you make a mistake in your table, you can always go back to it. update the data type, and then come back here and make the update to your form. I'm going to click Save. You're going to see this message, and I do this on purpose in my basic sessions so that you can see this message. If you recall, inside the roles, I did not make any modifications to my public role, which I should have, but I did that on purpose so that you can see this message. It's letting you know additional permissions required, okay? It's also letting you know that the create permission is required to add data to this table. I'm going to click confirm here anyway, but we will need to go into a role and make that modification before anyone can just submit the data to this table. And I will show you. We're going to hit confirm. There's my form. Okay, we have our little icon here to letting you know that you need to update the permissions in order for people to fill out this form. But two things we need to make modifications to. Let's go into our table. Let's go into our contacts. And for date created, we're going to simply change this to a timestamp. Whoops. We're going to change this into a timestamp. Hit save. We're going to proceed to convert from date time to a timestamp. Okay. And the second thing that we need to do is go into roles, go into the public, open it, and you will notice here that under create, it says none. This is the reason why we got that error message when we built the data part. However, because I want everyone to be able to fill out that form and create, we're going to simply say all records, click save, go back to our designer tab, and now you will see how we no longer see that icon as a warning to let us know that, hey, people cannot submit this form because you don't have the create enabled inside the public role. We also don't see the date field anymore in our submission form because we have made it a timestamp, so it's automatically going to submit the date and time. Now, I do want to make a modification to my form because you can see my label here is on the left, so I would like to include that as a placeholder as well, just to clean things up a little bit. We're going to click on it. We're going to click Change Data Source and Fields. Click Next. And underneath my zip code, I'm just going to say float, click Save, and you will see that change applied inside the data part. One last thing I want to mention before we deploy this public-facing form to show you how it works is you always want to get into a habit as best practice is to give your data parts a name, because it becomes much easier in the building process later on when you're setting up filters to locate that data part based on its name. So I will simply, what I like to do is just add public as a prefix to know that this form belongs to a public segment. And we'll just call this lead form and click save. All right, so we've given it a name. That's done. If you choose to keep the footer, you can. I'm just going to show you quickly how to remove this by going into the public segment and hiding the footer section so we no longer see it. One thing also that you can do is if you go back to your app page to view the form, you could add a simple heading to it by calling it Contact Us. Click back inside the app page and you will be able to see that label up above your form. If you want to get fancy and add your own custom label, you can click back on this button, click next, and above the first name, you can insert what we call an HTML block. And here you can customize your own personal heading, either by going directly into code and adding a different spin and customizing the look and feel of that label. Or you can use the toolbar that we have up above if you wish to maybe call it Contact Us, highlight the text, maybe make it bold, italic, up to you how you want to modify it, click Save, and you will be able to see a completely different heading above your form. Now, if you wish to remove this space before the HTML block, one thing that I didn't do, click Next, click on the HTML block, go to your layout and simply say no label, and that it's going to move the label now to the left or the heading. Now, of course, you can make this text much bigger if you want to, but I'm just giving you an idea of what you can do in terms of customization to make the form look a little bit more personalized if you'd like. So I will just remove that. I'll take out the HTML block, hit save, and we're back to this default heading that's provided inside the Flex framework. The final thing that I want to talk about in today's session is deployment. I want to show you how you can deploy this form so that users can start filling it out. And you do so by going inside the deployment tab. Inside the deployment tab, you're going to be able to see each one of your segments. We've only worked so far inside the public segment where we added a data part. Each one of these other segments has all the app pages, which you can deploy at this point if you want. But if you log in as the user, you're not going to see any functionality because we haven't built any forms and reports, which we'll do so in our intermediate class. But we do have a data part inside a public segment, inside this page here, so we can deploy it. And once you deploy it, you can share this link with any one of your users, and as long as they have access to that link, they're going to be able to fill out that form. You can also customize the URL path by clicking on the pencil icon. If you want to make the path a little bit shorter, you can do so. Just like in our Bridge environment, Bridge framework, you can embed this form into your own website. You don't have to have this custom URL link provided by Caspio. If you wish to put this form that we created onto your own site, you click on deployment code, you grab this code, copy it, and now paste this into your Weebly website, WordPress, and you're going to be able to see that form seamlessly embed into your page if you wish to generate leads that way. But we're going to simply click on this link just to see it. It's going to take us directly to that tab, and we should now be able to see that form along with our logo and our single navigation menu item that we have here at the top. If anyone fills out this form, so let's make one dummy submission. We're going to say Raj Singh. We will say title CEO, company name ABC, phone number something arbitrary, email rajs at let's just go solutions.com, address 123 Easy Street, and these other fields are not required. We'll hit submit. Okay, your submission was successful. If we go into our database table now of contacts, we are going to be able to see that latest entry that came in via that public-facing lead form, Raj Singh. Company description is empty, but in the advanced session, you will see how we automatically populate that information thanks to GPT Connect using Caspio extensions. Last thing that I want to talk about for the basic class, if we go inside the overview tab, and now you can see how the screen expands based on what you do inside your application. So one thing I'm noticing right away is that I have one user inside the admin role, but I don't have a user in my sales rep role. Even though I do, I just forgot to move that user inside the sales rep. And I'm going to show you that in just a moment, how to finish that off. But you can see we have 3 different roles in our application. We can see how many app pages we have created so far for each role, how many app pages we have deployed. We've only deployed our public-facing lead form. So you see number 1. For the admins, we have one user, which is Sarah Lee, because I did move Sarah Lee into that role. But here you can see that we don't have any users inside the sales rep role. So you can click on here to do that very quickly, or you can go into your roles. It's up to you. Click on the sales rep role, add the user, and move John Doe into that role like that. And now when you go back to your overview tab, you will be able to see how we have one user added inside the sales rep role. So this completes or concludes our basic session for today. We learned how to create a directory. We learned how to import table and how to create additional tables. We talked about roles and custom permissions. We talked about the designer tab, where we can completely design a unique look and feel to each one of these segments if we wanted to. We learned how to add app pages into each one of our app segments. And we also learned how to add a single form inside a public-facing segment in this app page called Contact Us. In the intermediate session, we're going to complete the entire application. We're going to build all of our data parts, all of our forms and reports for each one of these app segments. And then finally, in the advanced session, we'll talk about some more advanced topics like extensions, AI, triggered actions, tasks, and a few other ways to automate the experience inside this application. So I hope you enjoyed today's class. I hope it was easy to follow, and I will see you in the intermediate session. Thanks for watching.